Pokemon Legends ZA is here and has been for a few weeks now, and with it we get to revisit Kalos' central city, Lumiose. ZA is both a sequel to Legends Arceus and a direct sequel to Generation 6's X and Y, being set 5 years after the events of the latter. But how exactly does ZA make references to its colorful past, and what Easter eggs are being hidden throughout this version of Lumiose? Today we're going through some Easter eggs and references found in Pokemon ZA. Let's go! First off, we're going to tackle how ZA references its Legends predecessor, Arceus. So, while Legends ZA doesn't continue the storyline of Arceus directly, there is a special exhibit found in the Lumiose Museum that puts a spotlight on the Hisui region, which, to explain for non-fans watching this video, is the Sinnoh region from long ago. The exhibit references elements found in Legends Arceus and even expands upon them. For example, one of the displays shows off the Survey Corps' uniform, which were the outfits worn by Rei and Akari, the protagonists in those games. If you read the description, it makes a funny reference to how the headgear would never move despite the player's erratic movements. While we're talking about outfits, also on display are Commander Kamado's two outfits: his kimono, which is what we usually see him wearing in the game, and his armor, which he wears during our battles with him. Reading the description of Kamado's armor, we can see that it mentions that it bears a strong resemblance to the armor worn by Wickstrom, one of the members of the Elite Four in the Kalos region. We also can indirectly confirm that 5 years after XY, Wickstrom hasn't been replaced as a member of the Elite Four. Now, for our last outfit on display, it's Volos, the main antagonist of Legends Arceus. When checking the description for the outfit, it actually makes mention that it was personally donated by him, which kind of confirms that Volo is alive, I guess? So, while we're on the topic of antagonists, let's shift over to some interesting portraits found in the exhibit. 3 of the portraits displayed together are labeled Venerated Portraits, and feature individuals who look like they can be ancestors of some of Pokemon's major characters. The center portrait looks uncannily like Alder, the champion of the Unova League. However, the 2 portraits flanking it resemble Archie and Maxie, the leaders of the villainous teams Aqua and Magma, respectively. Apparently, these portraits were displayed by the Diamond and Pearl clan way long ago in Hisui. There's another section of the exhibit that displays popular hairstyles in Hisui, which is a cool way to showcase in a historical manner how players were able to customize their hair in Legends Arceus. Hanging on the walls are also some sketches attributed to Professor Laventon. Further inspecting these sketches, you'll see that a 15-year-old is credited with completing them, who we all know is the player character in the Legends Arceus games. Of course, there's so much more to the exhibit. One section highlights the different types of Pokeballs used during that era. Several paintings showcase locations you see in Legends Arceus. There are statues of Dialga and Palkia, the legendaries found in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, and by extension Arceus. There's even a stone tablet engraved with hieroglyphs of legendary Pokemon and Hisuian forms. It's a fun way to bridge what players have experienced in Legends Arceus to the present-day Pokemon world, and see how its events are interpreted in the modern era. Cool little lesson how things are passed down from generation to generation, you know? Let's move on to the game's connections to Pokemon X and Y. Of course, that is the most obvious connection to the franchise, being a direct sequel set 5 years after the events of those games. It's to be expected that characters from X and Y return, albeit with slightly altered roles. One of the first returning characters we meet is AZ and his Floette. AZ, as you might remember from XY, was the former king of Kalos who finally reunited with his Floette after 3,000 years. Yes, he's that old. This time around, instead of being King of Kalos, he is just the king of the quaint Hotel Z. Although, I gotta say, his Floette seems so much more badass in this game. Literally, one of the first interactions you have with it, it's firing off literal super lasers from its flower. Crazy. Next up is Mabel, who you might remember as one of the Team Flare scientists, alongside her cohorts Aliana, Brioni, Celosia, and Xerosic. All named after flowers, by the way. Well, this time around, she's the acting director of the Pokemon Research Lab. You know, the same one that Professor Sycamore used to run in XY. Speaking of Professor Sycamore, well, he's not in the game in the same way as AZ and Mabel are, but that doesn't mean we don't know what happened to him in the years between XY and ZA. On the 3rd floor of the Pokemon Research Lab, you can see photos of him hanging on the wall. Yes, this doesn't tell you anything really. However, if you chat with the NPC sitting down in the research lab lobby, he'll tell you verbatim, the professor resigned from his position. Not only that, there's also an NPC outside that tells you that Professor Sycamore and Trevor are in some far-off region carrying out research. If you don't remember who Trevor is, in XY he was one of your friends and rivals. Trevor joining the professor seems like an appropriate path for him, since in XY he was the one that delivered your Pokedex and was the one that was determined to finish their Pokedex first. So he just seems like the research type through and through. Tierno also gets a small update via NPC as well, with the NPC saying that there's a famous dancer named Tierno making waves in Unova. So glad to know that he becomes famous. Side note though, I know it's been a bit and I don't follow Pokemon as closely as I did a decade ago, but are Tierno and Lita connected in some way? They have similar hairstyles and they both dance. So is there like some sort of connection I am missing? Anyway, let's get back to actual appearances in the game. Emma returns in ZA with a fresh cut and semi-new threads, and the fanbase has not been okay ever since she was revealed. Those that played XY's post-game story know that Emma has a major part in it. However, in this game, she settles in for a new role as the head of her detective agency, the Looker Bureau. It seems like Looker chose Emma as his successor after years of being on the case. Speaking of Looker, we get a little peek at Looker via a picture hanging on the wall of him and Emma's Esper, Mimi. Off to the right, however, we also see a picture of Xerosic, who we previously mentioned was one of the Team Flare scientists, and one who played a major part in Emma's story as well. Alright, one more major appearance. The main man himself, Lysander, appears, going by the pseudonym L. Seems like the events of XY stressed him out a lot because he looks like he's aged a million years and he's even got a blind eye. Of course, for those of you that played the story, there's more to it than that, but that would be going into major spoiler territory, so we'll leave it at that. There is one semi-spoiler that I will reveal though, since it doesn't seem to ruin the story itself, and that's the fact that there is mention that there was a group of 5 children that stood up against Lysander, referring to the group in XY that consisted of the main player character, the rival, Shauna, Tierno, and Trevor. Anyway, since we're talking about Lysander, let's catch up for Team Flare for a second. The Lysander Cafe, which holds Team Flare's hideout, Lysander Labs, is still there. It's just left abandoned and unused because nobody seems to want to rent it out. Team Flare though? 2 ex-Team Flare grunts, Grisham and Grissel, reveal to the player that they started Team Flare Nouveau as a way to fix Team Flare's reputation using the team's original ideology before Lysander went a little crazy in XY. Now, as of writing this, the new Mega Dimension DLC trailer dropped featuring another returning character, and that is Corina, the roller skating gym leader from X and Y. This is all assumption, but it's looking like she's been putting in a lot of work collecting Mega Stones. Kind of like Thanos collecting the Infinity Stones. She also seems to have ditched the roller skates, which, going by what this NPC in Lumiose City says, seems to no longer be in vogue anyway. Anyway, it's nice to see that Corina actually makes an appearance in the DLC, because in the base version of the game, the Tower of Mastery and Lucario are featured as paintings, literally only paintings and a replica structure at the Lumiose Museum. One of the paintings of the interiors of the Tower of Mastery even features the silhouette of Calum from X and Y. On the other hand, the description of the Lucario sculpture says that it's a replica of the one at the Tower of Mastery, which in turn was created in commemoration of being the first Pokemon to Mega Evolve in the Kalos region. Because, side note, if you explore Lumiose City and talk to NPCs, one of them actually drops lore-accurate facts that Mega Evolution actually began in the Hoenn region, which we learn in Omega Ruffy and Alpha Sapphire, with Rayquaza being able to Mega Evolve to stop Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre from fighting. Anyway, much like the museum's Hisui exhibit, there are a lot of Kalos-centric pieces on display as well, some of which were even featured in XY, just moved to a different part of the museum. One piece depicts the Glittering Cave from XY, showcasing the cavern's gemstones and glowing moss. Another highlights the many Kalos power plants, the location where players fight Team Flare. There's also a scenic view of Comarine City shown, complete with its seaside port and railway leading to the grass-type gym leader Ramos. We also get paintings of Parfum Palace, which was the former royal estate that served as a museum of such in XY. The northernmost facility of Kalos, the Pokeball Factory, also gets a nice little mini exhibit with a painting of the location alongside a showcase of all the Pokeballs currently in use. There's also a returning piece that captures the Lavere City Gym, home to the Fairy-type gym leader Valerie. Speaking of Valerie, if you look around Lumiose, posters of Valerie can actually be found, showing off Valerie in her post-time skip look. There's even an NPC that gives us Valerie lore by mentioning that Valerie was originally from the Johto region. Honestly, I just love the random lore drops this game gives, because it expands on it without being too overbearing, you know? Now, while Legends ZA is the successor to both Legends Arceus and XY, that doesn't mean we don't see connections to other games in the series. Now, without being too overbearing, I'll make a quick hit list of some references that I liked to the other games. For Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, NPCs reference different aspects of life in Paldea. In one conversation, there's a small debate about which is stronger, Mega Evolution or Terrestrialization, the latter being the feature battle mechanic introduced in Scarlet and Violet. Meanwhile, on a less serious note, an NPC remarks that they're from Paldea, making them a sandwich pro, since sandwiches are basically a staple in the region. There are even shoutouts to major Paldean characters. Gita gets name-dropped by her title La Primera, and someone even mentions seeing sculptures by Arceus, the grass-type gym leader. Going back one generation, NPCs casually name-drop major characters from the Galar region. Jacinth mentions that Leon, the champion of the Galar League, recently visited, and NPCs talk about how battles between Leon and Raihan were some of the best they've ever seen. There's even a peer shoutout with people on the streets of Lumiose City talking about his music. And similar to the terrestrialization nod, one traveling NPC mentions possibly taking a trip to Galar to Dynamax, which is the battle mechanic introduced in Sword and Shield. For the Alolan region, Zygarde's ties to the region haven't faded, with Z-moves and their connection to Zygarde being brought up by Lysander and an NPC. For Black and White, a really small reference to the Castelia Cone, a signature dish found in the Unova region, is heard by one of the NPCs, and when I say heard, I meant read, because Pokemon Legends EA doesn't have voice acting. Now, throughout this video, we have been pointing out different scattered references to generations 2 through 4, but we haven't touched any from the originals yet. And I feel like the most important one is the fact that you can choose your Kanto starters again, which is like a never-ending connection to the original games in the series. Now, this is just a short little video covering some of the Easter eggs and references to the Pokemon franchise found in Pokemon Legends EA, but this is nowhere near the complete list. And once the Mega Dimensions DLC drops, we will for sure make a longer video or even a 107 facts about Pokemon Legends EA. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, if you like this video, comment down below to let us know what you thought. Thank you for watching the Leaderboard, your home for video game facts.